installing some lights in my side yard at my house. You know, the ones that automatically turn on when someone walks in front of it. My parents always had them at my childhood home, and as an adult woman who now lives on her own, I decided it was a pretty decent security measure. I added a total of 4 lights to my house, one in the front, one in the back, and one on either side of my house. It didn't seem like overkill, especially since I am paranoid, and being home alone in the dark bothers me more than anything. Hell, my electric bill is as expensive as it is because I leave lights on in dark rooms. Again, I'm a female who lives alone, so I believe this to certainly be justifiable. They worked perfectly for the first few nights. 1 or 2 would click on and then go off a few minutes later. Now, I should mention I live in Florida, so we have a lot of wildlife that walks through yards here. It's not unusual for a possum or a raccoon to wander through my yard in the middle of the night. Not to mention outdoor cats that are loose in my neighborhood as well. Even squirrels and lizards that walk through close enough to the sensors set these things off because they're the highly sensitive ones. However, the other night I ran into an issue. One of the lights is positioned next to a window, which is over the sink in my kitchen. The side yard is small because there's a fence separating mine from my neighbor's. I was loading the dishwasher at about 9:30. I always do this before I start to head to bed, and the light clicked on. It scared me, because I'm still getting used to them. So I quickly took a glance out the window. There was a possum crawling along the fence, but also staring directly at me as if it was annoyed I was disrupting its nightly stroll. I waved to it like it could see me, and continued to load the dishes. I grabbed my water bottle from the fridge and headed out of the kitchen, ready to go down the hall, and the lights still remained on. I didn't think anything of it since they normally stay on for a bit and then click off. I stopped to turn back around and watch the window, making sure the light was going to turn off. It didn't. Another few moments passed by, and the light still refused to turn off. My throat was dry now because this type of thing scares me, so I slowly approached the window to look out of it. For a minute, I was relieved because I saw nothing. I figured it was a technical error, so I went to bed and said I'd fix it in the morning. The next day I got up and headed outside to inspect the light. When I got below it, I noticed the light was off, and upon waving my hand up and in front of the sensor, it clicked on. I just assumed I didn't wait long enough for it to shut off, so I went back inside and went about my Saturday afternoon. It was later that night when I was boiling some water for my pasta, and the light clicked on again. This time I completely ignored it, and went about making my dinner. I hadn't even noticed that in the 15 minutes it took me to cook the pasta, serve it, and get the pan washed, the light was still on. I picked up my bowl of pasta, which was on the counter next to the sink, and when I glanced up I froze. The electronic floodlight was on, and hanging down in front of the window was a head. Like someone was on my roof leaning down and over the edge. Everything was washed out by the bright light, so it only appeared as a shadow, but it was enough to make me go cold and numb. The only detail I was able to see was the faint white of whoever's eyes, as their head hung over the side of my house. Their short hair was also hanging down, and was blown by the small wind gust. My mouth was open in shock, yet no sound was coming out. I was incapable of moving. I watched as the head slowly slid upwards and out of sight back, I'm assuming onto my roof. The light remained on. Engaging in my fight or flight response, I dropped my bowl of pasta and headed down my hallway for my phone, which was resting next to the TV. While I was quickly moving, whoever was on my roof was moving too. I heard loud scurrying and scratching above me as it scampered across my roof. I stopped, scrambling to pick up my phone, and the scampering above me continued for a few seconds. I dialed 911 and allowed it to ring as I stood there. At this point, I now stood in my living room, which has double doors leading to the backyard. It's meant to add to the open floor plan this house advertised. While I stood there, the light at the back of my house clicked on and lit up my backyard. It made me speechless, as the 911 operator had already come on the line and was asking me what my emergency was. I watched the windows frantically as the light continued to wash out my backyard, and then I saw it. Slowly sliding down from above was the shadow of the head. It was peering into the window, looking at me. I could still see the faint white of its eyes, and now the slight white of their teeth. Whether they were smiling or not, I couldn't tell. What followed is a sound that I can still hear, even when it's quiet. There was a sound of tapping, like a nail on glass. It sounded as if it was tapping on my window, asking to be let in, but I saw no arm or hand reaching down to do so. I backed up and out of sight of the window and into the hallway. The 911 operator was still asking that I give a location. "There's someone on my roof," I said quietly, thinking whatever it was could hear me. "Pardon me, ma'am. There is someone on my roof. They're watching me. I think they're going to try and break in," I said again. The operator told me to stay out of sight and wait for the officers to show up, so I did. I remained seated in my hallway for what felt like hours and listened to the continued tapping. Whatever it was still asking to be let in, asking me to come back to the window. It was merely 20 minutes till I heard the sirens, and the tapping stopped once they were in auditory range. I'll say what I said to the cops, which is, I know this sounds crazy, because once the cops were outside and asking for me to come out, the lights were now off. No floodlights, no heads, no eyes, and no tapping. Yet here I stood, in my driveway, sounding like a crazy person to the police. I gave my statement and allowed them to check the property. After further inspection, I was walked around to the right side of my house, which is where I first saw the head, and was told my gate was unlocked and open. What do you think? What should I do? Should I go somewhere for the night? I asked the officer who was walking me back to my front door. If you really want to know what I think you left your gate unlocked when you went to check the light this morning, he said flatly. What about the person and the sounds? Someone was there. I also think the lights casted some shadows of an animal walking by, and a raccoon decided to have a field day on your roof. He attempted to calm my tone. There's no footprints, no scuff marks, no scratches on the window, only paw prints. I think you need a good night's sleep and to relax tomorrow. So, I took his word for it. I watched them drive away from the window and headed to bed. I had to put my earbuds in to listen to music so that I couldn't hear the tapping and scratching in my head. Tonight is when the situation got more serious than it already was. I was sitting in the living room watching a movie this evening when the light behind my house came on yet again. Still shaken by the night before, I instantly muted my TV. The only light coming into the house windows now was from the floodlight and the movie. I sat in silence, watching the windows. My eyes darted around frantically, even to windows that were not lit. The minute I unmuted my TV is when I heard the sound again. The scratching and scraping, like something was being dragged across my rooftop. I jumped up from my seat, knocking the remote off my lap and onto the floor. I let the sounds of the movie mix with the horrible sounds above me. I grabbed my phone and had 911 ready to dial, and watched the windows with more interest than before. The scraping turned into thumping now. Footsteps, maybe. Something was up there. I could feel my house shake. The frames on my walls rattled and some fell off. I watched the one window in my living room start to become dark. Something was crawling down from my roof. All I could see was the shadow of it. A human figure with its arms and legs longer and stretched out. It scratched and thumped as it climbed down the wall of my house and over my window. It moved like a spider, the way it was able to slowly come down. I watched as it rotated and moved horizontal, disappearing from the window and moving to the wall. It was now in between the windows and I had lost sight of it. I retreated to the spot in my hallway, more shaken than the night before, and once again dialed 911. Giving the exact same information, details, and location, more officers were on the way. The operator asked that I remain on the phone with her, so I did. The scratching continued as the figure, I'm assuming, was moving around. While I sat there, the shaking mess that I was, I watched as my house became flooded with light. One by one, the lights turned on. It was silent for a while after this, while my house remained lit up and I was cowering on the phone. I was impatient for the police to arrive, so I asked how far away they were. There was no response. "Ma'am, how far away are they? The noises here stopped, but I think they're still outside," I repeated. All that followed were raspy breaths through the phone speaker, like someone was clinging to their last breath of life. "Ma'am, are you okay? Did I lose connection?" I attempted to get a verbal response. The only response I got was chilling. "You have to let us in now, Casey." The tapping on the windows began again, louder at every window. The scratching began on the roof again, louder. I shrieked and threw my phone across the hall. I have tucked myself inside my hall closet now. My phone is on 10%, and I've used my battery to write this out, because I don't even know if the police are coming. I don't know if I even actually talked to a real 911 operator. The tapping is still occurring on my windows, and I can hear it moving around from wall to wall trying to catch a sight of me. The lights are still on.